She was the kind of person who could walk through a crowded room and no one would notice her. She did not speak much, and when she did, her voice was soft, almost hesitant, as if she was afraid it would disturb the air around her. People often assumed she was shy, or worse, uninteresting. They did not know there was a depth inside her that no one had yet seen. She moved with a quiet grace, but the world around her was loud and busy, and it rarely stopped to pay attention to anyone like her. Every morning she would wake up early and make herself a small breakfast. The sun had barely risen, and the streets were still half asleep. She liked the quiet of these moments, when the world was slow and calm. She would take her coffee and sit by the window, watching the first few people start their day. She watched children walking to school with backpacks that seemed almost too big for them. She watched old men feeding pigeons in the park, their faces lined with years of stories. She watched people rushing, talking, and moving without really seeing each other. In those quiet moments, she felt a strange kind of peace. She felt like she was part of the world. Even if the world did not notice her, she had a small apartment on the second floor of a building in the middle of the city. The building was old and had wooden stairs that creaked under her feet. The walls were painted a pale color, and there was a faint smell of old books and dust. Her apartment was simple, just a small living room, a kitchen, a bathroom, and a bedroom. There were a few plants on the windowsill, and a single armchair by the window where she often sat. On the walls, there were pictures of places she had visited long ago, though most of them were faded and almost forgotten. There was a piano in the corner of the living room. It was not new, and its black paint was chipped in some places, but it was hers. It had been hers for a long time, longer than anything else she owned. During the day, she would leave for work. She worked at a small office where she handled paperwork and organized files. Her coworkers saw her as efficient but quiet. They did not know much about her, and she did not volunteer much about herself. She would sit at her desk, complete her tasks, and return home. It was a routine that she had followed for years. She did not complain, and she did not ask for attention. She liked the simplicity of her life, though sometimes she felt a little empty. There was a part of her that longed for something more, though she did not quite understand what it was. In the evenings, after work, she would walk slowly through the streets, sometimes stopping by small shops or cafes. She liked to watch people, to see how they lived. There was a bakery near her apartment, and she often bought a small pastry or a loaf of bread. She liked the smell of fresh bread and the warmth that came from the oven. It reminded her of other times, other places, and she felt a small comfort in it. Sometimes she would sit on a bench in the park, listening to the wind in the trees. She liked to watch the sunlight on the leaves and the way it danced on the ground. It was in these moments that she felt connected to the world. Even if no one else noticed her, people often judged her by her quiet nature. At work, her boss thought she was too reserved to take on bigger responsibilities. Her coworkers assumed she was not ambitious. Strangers on the street thought she was shy or timid. But the truth was far from it. Inside, she had a strength that few had seen. She had dreams and passions, though she kept them hidden. She had memories that could make people laugh, cry, and feel wonder, but she rarely shared them. Music was the center of her life, though she had not played in public for many years. It was a secret she held close, a treasure that only she knew was valuable. The piano in her living room was more than just an instrument. It was a part of her, a reflection of her soul. When she touched the keys, it was as if she could speak without words. The music would flow from her fingers, soft and gentle at first, then strong and commanding. She could play for hours, forgetting the world outside. The notes would fill the room, wrapping around her like a warm blanket. Sometimes she would close her eyes and imagine herself in a grand concert hall, the audience silent, listening to every note she played. She could feel the energy in the room, the connection between herself and the people who were moved by her music. It was a feeling she had known long ago. But it had been a long time since she had shared it with anyone else. She remembered the first time she had played in public. She was young, full of hope and excitement. The hall had been large, with high ceilings and rows of seats that seemed to stretch forever. She had been nervous, her hands shaking slightly as she sat at the piano. But the moment she began to play, everything else disappeared. The music flowed through her, and she felt powerful and alive. The audience had been captivated, silent and attentive, moved by the emotion in her playing. It had been a moment of pure joy, a moment she had carried with her ever since. But life had a way of changing things. People moved on, and so did she. Circumstances had forced her to leave that world behind. She had chosen a life of quiet and routine, hiding her talent from the world. It was not that she no longer loved music, she did. But she had learned that not everyone could understand or appreciate it. And sometimes the world could be cruel to those who were different, to those who stood out. So she stayed quiet, keeping her music for herself. Even so, there were moments when she could not resist. When she passed by a music store, she would pause and look at the pianos displayed in the window. She would press her fingers lightly on the keys through the glass, imagining the sound they would make. Her heart would beat faster, and a smile would touch her lips. It was a small joy, a reminder of what she had once loved and what she still held inside. One day, she found herself walking past a small music shop she had never noticed before. The door was open, and the warm light inside spilled onto the street. She felt a pull, a curiosity she could not resist. Inside, there was a Yamaha piano, shining under the lights. Something about it drew her in, a memory or a feeling she could not name. She walked closer, her fingers brushing over the smooth surface. It had been so long since she had touched a piano that was not hers, and yet it felt familiar, like coming home. The shop owner noticed her and smiled. "Would you like to try it?" asked. She hesitated, unsure if she was ready. But there was a spark inside her, a small voice urging her to say yes. She nodded, and the owner moved aside. She sat down slowly, her hands hovering over the keys. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the years in her fingers. Then she pressed a single note. The sound filled the room, and for a moment, she felt the old magic return. People passing by the shop paused to listen, curious about the music that was flowing so beautifully from the piano. She did not notice them. She closed her eyes and let herself be carried away by the sound. It was like meeting an old friend, familiar and comforting. The music grew stronger, more confident, and she felt a thrill she had not felt in years. She had forgotten how it felt to play for others, even without knowing who they were. It reminded her of who she was and what she could do. For the first time in a long time, she felt alive. The quiet woman that no one noticed had returned, if only for a moment, to the place where she belonged. And though she did not know what would come next, she felt a hope that had been buried deep inside her. The piano had awakened something that would not be silenced again. She had been quiet for too long, and now the music was ready to speak. She had not always been this quiet woman, unnoticed in the crowd. There was a time when the sound of her music could fill a room and move everyone inside it. She remembered those days vividly, though they belonged to a life that seemed far away now. Back then, she had been young, full of energy and hope, with dreams bigger than she could hold in her hands. Music was her voice, her way of expressing feelings too deep for words. She had grown up in a small house where music was a constant presence. Her parents loved music, though neither of them were professional musicians. Her father played a little violin, and her mother had a small collection of piano pieces that she would play on weekends. The house was modest, with creaky floors and a kitchen that smelled like warm bread and tea. But it was full of love and laughter. From an early age, she was drawn to the piano. She loved how it felt under her fingers, how the keys responded to her touch, how the sound could rise and fall like a living thing. She practiced for hours every day, losing herself in the rhythm and melody. By the time she was a teenager, it was clear she was gifted. Teachers who had worked with many students recognized her talent immediately. She had a unique style, a way of making the piano sing with emotion. Her performances were not just about playing the right notes. They were about telling a story, making people feel something deep inside. She would close her eyes and let her fingers move freely, letting the music take over her completely. Audiences were mesmerized. There were moments when she looked up and saw tears in their eyes, or smiles spreading across their faces, and she felt a rush of happiness that she could not describe. Competitions came, one after another, and she won many of them. People began to take notice. She traveled to different cities, performing in small halls, then larger ones. The applause was thrilling, a sound she would never forget. She met other musicians, shared experiences, and learned from them. She was respected for her skill, admired for her dedication, and loved for the passion that shone through her performances. But amid the excitement, there were challenges that she had to face. Challenges that tested her strength and patience. Her family supported her in every way they could. But life was not always easy. There were financial pressures, and the constant need to prove herself weighed heavily on her shoulders. She learned to be disciplined, to manage time and energy carefully. But she also learned that talent alone was not always enough. There were moments of self-doubt, times when she questioned if she was doing the right thing, if all the effort was worth it. Yet she kept going, driven by a love for the piano that was stronger than any fear. One day, a significant opportunity arose. She was invited to perform in a large concert hall in the city. It was a prestigious event, with critics and musicians from around the country in attendance. She was thrilled, but nervous. The hall was enormous, with high ceilings, polished wooden floors, and rows of seats that seemed to stretch endlessly. She walked onto the stage, her hands trembling slightly as she sat at the piano. The audience was silent, their eyes fixed on her. She took a deep breath and began to play. The music flowed effortlessly. She closed her eyes, letting her emotions guide her fingers. The notes rose and fell, soft and gentle at times, powerful and commanding at others. Every key she pressed told a story, and the audience was swept away by it. People leaned forward, captivated by the sound, feeling every emotion she conveyed. There were moments of tension, moments of calm, moments of pure joy, all expressed through the piano. When she finished, the hall was silent for a heartbeat, then erupted into applause. She felt a rush of satisfaction and relief, a sense of accomplishment that she would never forget. But life, as it often does, had other plans. Shortly after this performance, unexpected events changed everything. A close family member fell seriously ill, and she had to step back from her music to care for them. The responsibility fell heavily on her, and she put aside her dreams to focus on what was necessary. The piano, once the center of her life, became a distant memory. Days and weeks passed, then months, and slowly she stopped performing. She still played occasionally in private, but the thrill of performing in front of an audience was gone. As time went on, other challenges appeared. She faced disappointments in competitions, missed opportunities, and financial struggles. Each setback chipped away at her confidence, and she began to doubt herself. She asked herself if she had made the right choices, if the sacrifices she had made were worth it. She felt the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. And the music that had once been her refuge became a reminder of what she had lost. She could no longer see a path forward that included both her responsibilities and her passion. So, she chose to step away quietly, without fanfare or explanation. She moved to a new city, started a new life with a simple job, and gradually became the quiet woman everyone saw now. The piano remained, but it was no longer a public part of her life. She would play alone, letting the music wash over her, but she did not share it with anyone. People assumed she had no remarkable talents, that she was just another quiet person in the crowd. Only she knew the truth, the depth of her skill, the power of her music, and the emotions she had once shared with thousands. Sometimes, she would think back to her performances, remembering the feel of the keys under her fingers, the energy of the audience, the thrill of creating something beautiful that touched people deeply. She missed it, but she also knew that life had required sacrifices. She had chosen to protect herself from disappointment and pain by stepping away. She told herself it was necessary, that she was safer this way, and yet a small spark always remained, a reminder that the music inside her had never truly disappeared. One evening, as she walked home from work, she passed a music store she had never noticed before. The warm glow of light spilled onto the street, and she felt a familiar pull in her chest. She slowed her steps, drawn to the window, and saw a piano displayed inside. It was a Yamaha, shining under the lights, almost calling to her. Memories flooded back, and for a moment, she felt the old excitement stir inside her. Her hands itched to touch the keys, to feel the music flow through her once again. She hesitated, unsure if she was ready. It had been so long since she had played in front of anyone. She wondered if she still had the skill, the confidence, the passion. Yet something inside her urged her forward. She took a deep breath, pushed open the door, and stepped inside. The shop smelled of polished wood and fresh sheet music. The owner looked up and smiled warmly. "Would you like to try it?" he asked. She nodded, almost without thinking, and moved toward the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys, trembling slightly as she recalled the motions she had once known so well. She pressed a single note, and the sound filled the room. It was like a door opening to the past, a reminder of who she was and what she could do. She closed her eyes and let herself play, allowing the music to return to her hands naturally. The notes flowed, soft at first, then strong, as if no time had passed at all. People outside the shop paused to listen. Curious about the music that filled the street, she did not notice them, lost in the joy of rediscovering a part of herself she had thought was gone forever. The piano had awakened her memories, her talent, and her passion. It reminded her that no matter how quiet she had become, no matter how unnoticed she was by the world, the music inside her still had power. She felt alive, connected to something greater than herself, and for the first time in years, she felt hope. The past had returned to her in the most beautiful way, through the keys of a piano that called her back to life. She sat at the Yamaha piano, her fingers trembling slightly over the keys. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater and the faint sound of the city outside. She felt the weight of years pressing on her shoulders. The years she had spent hiding her talent, playing in private, and living quietly. She wondered if she still remembered how to play for others. If she still had the strength to pour her emotions into the music and let it flow freely. A small voice inside her whispered, encouraging her to try. Slowly, she pressed a single note. It sounded clear and bright, and she felt a small thrill run through her body. She smiled, feeling a sense of anticipation she had not felt in years. She began to play softly, almost hesitantly, her hands testing the keys. The notes filled the shop, floating through the air like tiny sparks of memory. She could feel the music returning to her, the rhythm and flow that had once been second nature. The first few bars were cautious, careful, as if she were feeling her way back into a world she had left behind. And yet, there was something powerful in her touch, a strength that could not be hidden. The piano responded to her as if it recognized her, as if it had been waiting for her return. People outside the shop began to notice. A few passers-by slowed their steps, drawn to the sound of the piano. One person paused and listened for a moment, then smiled, clearly moved by the music. Another stopped and turned their head, curiosity lighting their eyes. The notes continued to flow, gentle at first, then growing stronger, more confident. Her fingers danced across the keys, and she could feel the old magic returning. She had forgotten how much joy it could bring her, how the music could carry her away from everything else. She closed her eyes and let herself go deeper into the music. Each note was a word, each phrase a sentence, telling a story that only she could tell. Memories came flooding back, performances in grand halls, applause from audiences, moments of triumph and joy. She remembered the thrill of commanding a room, of connecting with people through her music. She felt alive in a way she had not felt in years. Her fingers moved faster now, more confidently, as if they had never forgotten the skill they once possessed. The shop owner watched quietly, not wanting to disturb her. He had seen many people come and go, some timid, some bold, but none who played with the emotion and control she had. Her music was not just technically perfect. It was full of feeling, full of life. It filled the room in a way that made the hair on his arms stand up. He realized that she was extraordinary, though she did not seem to notice the attention she was attracting. People outside continued to pause, listening in awe as the melody swelled and changed, each note speaking to something deep within them. She did not notice the world around her. She did not notice the people stopping to watch, the smiles, the tears that appeared on faces outside the shop. She was lost in the music, and the music had her. Each chord, each scale, each arpeggio carried her further from the quiet life she had led and closer to the person she had always been. It was a moment of rediscovery, a moment of reconnecting with a part of herself she had hidden away for too long as she continued to play. She felt a mixture of emotions. There was joy, of course, the pure happiness of creating something beautiful. There was also sadness, the memory of years lost, opportunities missed, and the quiet life she had led in hiding. But there was also hope, a feeling that she could not ignore. She realized that even after all this time, her music still had power. She could still touch people, move them, and make them feel deeply. It was a revelation, one that brought tears to her eyes. The melody shifted, becoming more complex and layered. She was no longer playing cautiously. She was playing with confidence, letting her emotions guide her hands. The music rose and fell, powerful and soft, fast and slow, weaving a story that only she could tell. It was as if she were speaking without words, expressing feelings that could not be put into sentences. Every person listening could feel it, whether they understood the notes or not. The music was alive, and it was reaching out to touch everyone who heard it. Time seemed to stop. The outside world faded away. She did not notice the minutes passing or the people gathering near the shop. She did not notice the shop owner holding his breath, afraid to break the spell. She only felt the music flowing through her hands, her arms, her chest, and into the room. It was a connection that transcended everything else. It reminded her of who she was, of the life she had once led, and of the possibilities that still lay ahead. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of freedom. She realized that she had been holding herself back, not because she had forgotten how to play, but because she had been afraid of being seen, afraid of stepping into a world that might judge her. Now, sitting at the piano, she understood that the fear was unnecessary. The music was hers, and she had the power to share it whenever she chose. The world could no longer keep her hidden. The melody began to slow, softening into gentle notes that floated in the air like whispers. She played the final chord with care, letting it linger and fade naturally. The room was silent for a moment, then the sound of quiet applause began. It was soft at first, but it grew as people stepped closer, clapping and smiling. They had been watching and listening, captivated by the emotion in her playing. She opened her eyes slowly, taking in the faces around her. For the first time, she realized that people were not just noticing her. They were appreciating her, truly seeing her talent. She felt a mixture of embarrassment and pride. She had forgotten what it was like to perform in front of others, and the attention was both surprising and exhilarating. Yet, she did not let it overwhelm her. She stood up slowly, offering a small, polite smile to those who had gathered. The shop owner approached, his eyes shining. "That was incredible," he said simply. "I've never heard anything like it. You have a gift." She nodded, her heart racing, not knowing how to respond. Words seemed inadequate compared to the music she had just played. She realized that she did not need to explain herself or justify her talent. The music had spoken for her, and that was enough. People continued to express their admiration, asking questions, offering compliments, and telling her how moved they had been. She listened quietly, feeling a strange mix of humility and pride. She realized that she had underestimated herself all these years, that the world had not diminished her talent, and that she could still make a difference through her music. It was a powerful realization, one that gave her a sense of purpose she had not felt in a long time. As she left the piano and stepped away from the shop, she felt a lightness in her chest. The fear and doubt that had weighed on her for so long had been lifted, replaced by a renewed sense of confidence and determination. She understood that this was only the beginning, that there were more opportunities to play, to share her gift, and to reconnect with the world. The music had reminded her of who she was, and she was ready to embrace it fully. Her quiet life had been transformed, and a new chapter was beginning, one filled with possibility, hope, and the power of her music. The next days were filled with a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. The memory of playing the piano in the shop stayed with her, and she found herself thinking about it constantly. She could still feel the music in her hands, the flow of the melody, and the way the notes had filled the room. It had been a long time since she had felt so alive, and she realized that she wanted more. The idea of sharing her music again, of letting it reach others, was both thrilling and terrifying. She knew that she had to take it slowly to rebuild her confidence and trust in herself. She returned to the music shop several times, sometimes just to sit and listen to the piano, other times to play. Each time she touched the keys, the memories of her past performances came rushing back. Her fingers moved with skill and precision, but now they carried a deeper sense of emotion. She played not to impress anyone, but because it felt necessary, as if the music was a part of her that had been dormant for too long. Each note told a story. Each chord connected her to the world outside herself. The shop owner had begun to notice her dedication. He watched quietly as she played, often staying in the background, making sure she had the space and freedom to express herself. Sometimes he would compliment her, telling her that the music she created was remarkable. She smiled politely, feeling both proud and hesitant. She was not used to being praised in public, and it made her uneasy. Yet the encouragement gave her a small boost of confidence. She realized that there were people who could appreciate her gift, would not judge her for being quiet or reserved. One afternoon, a local music teacher entered the shop. She had been passing by and heard the music from the street. Curious, she stepped inside and found the pianist playing with a mixture of passion and precision. She stood quietly, listening to the performance, completely captivated. When the music ended, she approached the pianist with a smile. "That was beautiful," she said. "You have an incredible talent. Have you ever considered performing again?" The pianist shook her head, unsure how to respond. The idea of performing in front of an audience was both appealing and frightening. It had been years since she had faced the eyes of a crowd, and the thought made her heart race. The teacher encouraged her gently, explaining that there were small local events where she could perform without pressure. She emphasized that the goal was not fame or recognition, but the joy of sharing music with others. The pianist listened carefully, feeling a mixture of hope and fear. She had always loved performing, but she had been afraid of the expectations and the possibility of failure. Yet something in the teacher's words sparked a desire to try again, to reconnect with the part of herself that had been hidden for so long. She agreed to perform at a small local event. It was a community gathering, not a grand concert hall, but it felt like a safe place to start. She began to prepare, practicing diligently every day. Her fingers moved over the keys with confidence, and the music flowed from her heart. She chose pieces that she loved, pieces that had meaning to her, and she worked to convey emotion through each note. The preparation was both challenging and rewarding. She felt her old nerves returning, but she also felt a sense of excitement she had not known in years. The day of the performance arrived, and she found herself backstage waiting to go on. She could hear the soft murmur of the audience, the rustling of chairs, and the occasional cough. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she took deep breaths to calm herself. She remembered the piano in the shop, the first time she had played for others in so long, and she drew strength from that memory. She reminded herself that this was not about proving anything to anyone, but about sharing a part of herself that had been dormant for too long. When it was her turn, she walked onto the small stage and sat at the piano. The audience was quiet, waiting expectantly. She closed her eyes for a moment and let herself breathe. Then she began to play. At first, the notes were soft and tentative, as if testing the waters. But soon, the music grew stronger, more confident, and filled the room. She felt the familiar thrill of performing, the connection between her and the audience. She could sense their attention, their admiration, and their emotions, and it gave her a rush of joy. As she continued, she noticed the audience leaning forward, listening intently to every note. Faces reflected wonder, amazement, and even tears. She felt a deep connection to each person, as if the music had created a bridge between her heart and theirs. The experience was overwhelming, yet beautiful. She had forgotten how powerful it could feel to share music with others, to see the effect it had on people. Each chord, each melody, carried her story, her emotions, and her soul. She felt alive in a way she had not felt in years. The performance lasted longer than she expected. She played piece after piece, allowing herself to be carried by the music. When she finally finished, there was a moment of silence, as if the audience needed time to absorb the experience. Then the applause began, growing louder and louder, filling the room with warmth and admiration. She opened her eyes and looked at the faces around her, seeing the joy and appreciation in their expressions. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen, truly understood, and truly valued. After the performance, several people came up to her, expressing their admiration and gratitude. They told her how moved they had been, how her music had touched them deeply. She listened quietly, feeling a mix of pride, humility, and gratitude. She realized that her talent had never left her, and that sharing it with others brought a kind of fulfillment she had longed for. She had feared the attention, but now she understood that it was not something to fear. It was a gift, both for herself and for others. In the days that followed, she received invitations to perform at other small events. She accepted some and declined others, taking care not to overwhelm herself. Each performance built her confidence and strengthened her connection to the world. She found joy in seeing the reactions of the audience, in feeling the energy of the room, and in expressing herself through music. The quiet life she had lived for so long began to transform, replaced by a sense of purpose, excitement, and fulfillment. Through these experiences, she learned something important, that her music was not just a talent, but a part of who she was. It was a way to communicate, to connect, and to heal. She realized that she did not need to hide that the world could appreciate her, and that she could find joy in sharing her gift. The piano had always been a part of her life, and now it had returned in a way that brought meaning, happiness, and hope. She continued to play, both in private and in public, each time feeling more confident and connected. Her music became a source of strength, a reminder of who she was and what she could achieve. She no longer feared being seen or judged because she had discovered the joy of expressing herself fully. The quiet woman who had once gone unnoticed was beginning to emerge, her music leading the way, and the world could no longer ignore her. The following weeks were filled with a new energy that she had not felt in years. The piano had returned to her life in a way she could have never imagined, and with it, a sense of purpose. Each day, she practiced diligently, but now the music was not just for herself. She played with intention, imagining the people who would hear her, the emotions she could evoke, and the stories she could tell without words. She had come to understand that her music was more than a talent. It was a bridge to the hearts of others, a language that transcended spoken words. Word of her performances began to spread quietly at first. People who had attended the small events shared their experiences with friends, describing the woman who played the piano with such power and emotion that it seemed to touch something deep within the soul. Soon, invitations came from community centers, local schools, and even small concert venues. She approached each opportunity with both excitement and caution, aware of her own limitations but eager to share what she had once kept hidden. Her first invitation to perform in a slightly larger hall was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. She arrived early, feeling the familiar mix of anticipation and anxiety. The hall was modest, yet the stage felt much bigger than the shop or community events she had played in before. She walked to the piano, her fingers brushing the keys lightly, feeling the texture and weight of the instrument beneath her touch. She took a deep breath, recalling the first time she had ever performed in a grand hall. The thrill of commanding the room, the energy of the audience. That memory gave her strength. She reminded herself that she was capable, that she had always been capable, and that the music inside her was ready to speak once again. The moment she pressed the first note, the room fell silent. Every eye in the hall turned to her, and for a brief moment she felt exposed. But then, as her fingers moved with confidence, as the notes filled the space, she felt herself blending with the music. It was not just a performance. It was a conversation, a shared experience between her and the audience. The notes rose and fell, soft and delicate at times, powerful and commanding at others. Each phrase carried meaning, and the audience felt it. They leaned forward, captivated by the emotion and skill in her playing. She had not realized how much she had missed this connection, this ability to communicate something beyond words. As she played, she noticed subtle reactions from the audience. A woman in the front row wiped a tear from her cheek. A young boy leaned close to his parent, mesmerized. An older man nodded slowly, a small smile spreading across his face. She did not need to know their stories to understand that the music was reaching them, touching their hearts. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that what she was giving was meaningful, that her music mattered. When the final note faded into silence, the hall erupted into applause. It was not just polite clapping. It was heartfelt, a collective recognition of her talent and the emotion she had conveyed. She stood slowly, acknowledging the audience with a shy smile. The sound of applause washed over her, not as something to fear or measure, but as a confirmation of the power she had always held. She felt a quiet pride, tempered with humility, and a profound sense of belonging. For the first time in years, she realized that she had returned fully to the world she had once known, stronger and more confident than before. After the performance, several people approached her. Some wanted to learn about her journey. Others simply wanted to express how much her music had moved them. She listened, smiled, and responded softly, realizing that she could share pieces of her story without feeling exposed. Each conversation reminded her that her quiet life had not erased her impact. It had merely delayed it. She had been underestimated for so long, but now she could show, gently and powerfully, that her talent and passion were still alive. The experience opened doors she had not expected. A small local radio station asked to interview her, eager to hear her story and share it with listeners. She agreed, nervous but willing, knowing that it was another way to connect. The interview was simple, focusing on her journey, her love of music, and the lessons she had learned. She spoke about the quiet years, the struggles, and the rediscovery of her passion. Listeners called in, offering words of encouragement and gratitude. She realized that her music and story could inspire others, and that gave her a new sense of responsibility and purpose. She continued performing at small venues, community events, and occasionally at schools, where children listened with wide eyes and open hearts. Each performance was unique, filled with the emotion and nuance that she poured into her music. She found that sharing her talent with others was as rewarding as playing for herself. She began to understand that the quiet life she had lived was not a limitation, but a foundation, a period of reflection and growth that had prepared her for this new chapter. Over time, she became more confident in her public performances. She learned to embrace the attention, to accept the admiration without fear, and to let the music guide her. She discovered that her quiet nature was not a weakness. It was a strength, allowing her to connect with people deeply and authentically. The world, which had once overlooked her, began to recognize the value of her talent, not for its flash or spectacle, but for its depth and sincerity. She also realized that her journey had taught her resilience. Life had taken her away from the piano for a time, but it had never taken her love of music. The obstacles, the self-doubt, and the quiet years had shaped her, making her stronger and more grounded. When she played now, she did so with an understanding of herself and her gift that she had never had before. Each note was deliberate, each phrase intentional, and each performance a testament to her perseverance. As her reputation grew, she began to inspire others quietly. People who had struggled with self-doubt, hidden talents, or the fear of judgment reached out to her. They asked for advice, for guidance, or simply for encouragement. She listened, shared her experiences, and offered support. She became a quiet mentor, showing others that it was possible to reclaim one's passion, to rediscover one's strength, and to step into the light even after years of hiding. Through it all, she never lost sight of the joy that had first drawn her to the piano. She played not for fame, not for applause, but because it was who she was. Music had always been her voice, her companion, and her way of connecting with the world. Now, it was also her bridge to the lives of others, a tool for healing, inspiration, and understanding. She had learned that talent could be hidden, overlooked, or underestimated, but it could never be erased. Looking back, she realized that her journey had been a full circle. From the quiet, unnoticed years to the rediscovery of her passion. From private practice to public admiration, she had grown in ways she could never have imagined. The piano had been waiting for her, as if it knew she would return. And when she did, it welcomed her back with open arms, allowing her to reclaim the life she had always deserved. In the end, she understood that the quiet years were not wasted. They had given her perspective, patience, and strength. They had taught her the value of persistence, the importance of self-belief, and the power of sharing one's gifts with the world. She continued to play, each performance a celebration of her journey, her resilience, and her unwavering love for music. And as the notes flowed from her fingers, filling rooms and hearts alike, she knew that her quiet life had prepared her perfectly for this moment of recognition, fulfillment, and joy.